The heart rate monitor didn't beep. It shrieked, a single high-pitched tone that signaled death. 12 of the city's best private paramedics stood frozen around the gold-plated crib, their hands hovering over equipment worth millions. Yet they were utterly useless. Rocco Marchetti, a man who could dismantle criminal empires with a single phone call, was on his knees. Tears streaming down his face, begging for a breath that wouldn't come. No one looked at the quiet maid scrubbing the marble floor in the hallway. They didn't know she held the one secret that could save the heir to the Marchetti throne. They didn't know who she really was. Not until she dropped her rag, shoved a paramedic aside, and did the unthinkable. The Marchetti estate, located on the secluded cliffs of the Amalfi Coast, but operating with the cold efficiency of a New York boardroom, was not a home. It was a fortress of glass, steel, and paranoia. Aria Vance, known within these walls only as Annie, dipped her sponge into the bucket of grey soapy water. Her hands, once insured for $5 million, each were now red-chapped and smelling of lemon bleach. She kept her head down. That was the first rule of survival in Rocco Marchetti's house: be invisible. "You missed a spot, Annie." The voice was shrill and dripping with disdain. Aria didn't flinch. She knew Vanessa Rocco's fiancé was standing directly behind her. She could smell the cloying scent of Chanel No. 5 and the metallic tang of expensive champagne. "I apologize, ma'am," Aria whispered, her voice rough from disuse. She scrubbed the pristine white marble harder, though there was no dirt there. Vanessa kicked the bucket. It was a casual, petty movement, sending a wave of grey water sloshing over Aria's uniform and onto the floor she had just dried. "Look at that." Vanessa sighed, checking her manicured nails. "You're clumsy. I don't know why Rocco keeps you around. If it were up to me, you'd be on the street with the rest of the rats." Aria bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood. 3 years ago, she thought I would have been operating on your deviated septum, not cleaning up your spilled drinks. But those days were gone. Buried under a mountain of false accusations, a revoked medical license, and a scandal that had destroyed her life at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Now she was just Annie the mute maid who needed the cash-in-hand salary to pay for her sick mother's dialysis. "Is there a problem here?" The temperature in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. Rocco Marchetti stood at the top of the grand staircase. He was a man carved from granite and shadow, dressed in a bespoke Brioni suit that cost more than Aria's childhood home. He radiated a dangerous, predatory energy. He wasn't just a mob boss. He was a kingpin who controlled shipping lines from Naples to New Jersey. His eyes, dark and intelligent, swept over the scene. The spilled water, the smirking fiancé, the kneeling maid. "No problem, darling," Vanessa said, her voice instantly transforming into a purr. She stepped over Aria as if the maid were a piece of furniture. "Just teaching the help some standards. You know how standards matter." Rocco didn't look at Vanessa. He looked at Aria. For a second, Aria felt a jolt of panic. Did he recognize her? Had he seen the news articles from 3 years ago? The angel of death surgeon. But Rocco just looked at the wet floor. "Clean it up, then go to the nursery. The night nurse is sick. I need someone to sit outside the door while Leo sleeps." "Rocco," Vanessa protested, clutching his arm. "She's filthy. You can't have her near the baby." Rocco pulled his arm away, his expression stony. "Leo has been fussy all day. I don't want the room empty. Annie, go. Wash your hands first." Yes, sir, Arya said quietly. She gathered her bucket, keeping her eyes on the floor. As she hurried toward the servants' quarters to scrub up, she felt a strange knot of tension in her chest. It wasn't fear of Rocco. It was something else. A medical intuition she hadn't used in years. When she had passed the nursery earlier, she had heard baby Leo crying. It wasn't a normal cry of hunger or a wet diaper. It was a high-pitched, breathless wheeze. Stridor. She had recognized it instantly, but she had forced herself to keep walking. She was a maid. Maids didn't diagnose the boss's son. Maids didn't speak unless spoken to. But as she washed her hands with antibacterial soap scrubbing until her skin was raw, the sound of that wheeze replayed in her mind. Something is wrong, she thought. Something is terribly wrong. The nursery was larger than most apartments. It was painted in soft creams and golds, filled with toys that had never been touched. In the center of the room stood a crib made of hand-carved mahogany. Arya sat on a stiff wooden chair by the door, her hands folded in her lap. The house was quiet, save for the distant murmur of security guards patrolling the perimeter and the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock. Inside the crib, 6-month-old Leo was sleeping, or at least that's what it looked like. Rocco entered the room 20 minutes later. He had removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie, looking less like a kingpin and more like an exhausted father. He walked to the crib, his hard features softening as he looked down at his son. "He's quiet," Rocco whispered more to himself than to Arya. "He's been screaming for 2 days." Arya didn't speak. She watched Rocco's back. She watched the way his shoulders slumped. He loved this child. That was the only redeeming quality she had seen in the ruthless crime lord. Since Leo's mother, Rocco's first wife, had died in childbirth, Leo was the only thing that mattered to him. Vanessa was just a decoration. Leo was his heart. Rocco reached down to stroke the baby's cheek. He froze. "Leo." The single word hung in the air, heavy with sudden dread. Rocco touched the baby again, then shook him gently. "Leo, wake up." Arya stood up. Her training kicked in before her brain could stop her. She took a step forward, violating the unspoken rule of distance. "Leo!" Rocco's voice rose to a shout. He scooped the baby up. The child was limp, a rag doll. His skin was a terrifying shade of pale blue, tinged with grey around the lips. "Sir," Arya said, her voice trembling. "Put him down. Check his airway." Rocco spun around, his eyes wild. "What? Put him down?" Arya didn't know where the authority came from, but her voice cracked like a whip. At that moment, the door burst open. Vanessa rushed in, followed by Bruno, the head of security. "What's happening? I heard yelling," Vanessa shrieked. "He's not breathing!" Rocco roared, clutching the limp infant to his chest. "Bruno, get the medics now! Get the private team." Bruno spoke into his radio, barking codes. The house erupted into chaos. Alarms blared. But amidst the noise, Arya saw the details the others missed. She saw the slight swelling around the baby's eyes, the rash creeping up his neck. Anaphylaxis, no too slow. Poisontuchung, aspiration. "Give him to me," Arya said, stepping closer. "Get back." Vanessa shoved Arya hard, sending her stumbling into the wall. "Don't touch him, you dirty stray. You probably did this." "Vanessa, shut up," Rocco yelled. He laid Leo on the changing table, his hands shaking so violently he could barely undo the onesie. Come on, Leo. Come on, fight, little man. The paramedics arrived in under 3 minutes. They were an elite private team on retainer for the Marchetti family, paid specifically to handle gunshot wounds and discreet surgeries. 12 of them crowded into the nursery, carrying trauma bags, oxygen tanks, and a portable defibrillator. Clear the area, the lead paramedic, a man named Miller, shouted. Arya was pushed to the back of the room, pressed against the cold wall. She watched as they swarmed the baby. No pulse, no breath sounds, Miller barked. Start compressions. Get the bag valve mask ready. Prepare epinephrine pediatric dose. They were doing everything right. By the book. It was the standard protocol for cardiac arrest. But Arya's eyes were locked on the monitor they had hooked up. The rhythm wasn't flatline yet. It was chaotic, and the baby's chest wasn't rising with the bag valve mask. Airway is obstructed, Miller yelled. I can't get air in. He's choked on something. Suction, another paramedic shouted. They shoved a tube down the infant's throat. Nothing. Clear. But the lungs aren't inflating. Miller's face was pale. Sweat beaded on his forehead. It's lower. Throat swelling. Glottic edema. Massive reaction. Intubate, Rocco screamed, grabbing Miller by the collar of his uniform. Put the tube in. We're trying. Sir. The throat is closed shut. I can't see the cords. I can't get the tube in. The panic in the room was palpable. It smelled like sour sweat and ozone. Rocco released Miller and backed away, his hands in his hair. Do something, I pay you millions. Save him. We need to cut, Miller said, his voice shaking. Cricothyrotomy. Surgical airway. Do it. Miller grabbed a scalpel, but his hand was trembling. He was a trauma medic used to stabilizing adults with bullet holes, not performing delicate neck surgery on a 6-month-old infant with a collapsing trachea. He positioned the blade over the baby's neck. Arya watched from the corner. She saw the angle of the blade. It was wrong. He was too low. He was going to hit the thyroid gland. He was going to cause a massive hemorrhage, and Leo would drown in his own blood before he ever took a breath. Stop, Arya whispered. No one heard her. Miller hesitated. I can't find the landmarks. The swelling is too bad. He's turning purple, Vanessa screamed from the doorway. He's dying. Oh my God, he's dying. The monitor let out a warning beep. Oxygen saturation was dropping. 60%. 50%. The heart rate was plummeting. Bradycardia. We're losing him, a nurse said, her voice flat with shock. Rocco let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a guttural roar of pure agony. He drew his gun, a sleek Beretta, and pointed it at Miller's head. Save him, or I will blow your brains out right now. Miller was shaking so hard, he dropped the scalpel. It clattered onto the floor. I can't, Mr. Marchetti. I can't get the airway. It's impossible. The room froze. 12 trained professionals, the most powerful man in the city, all of them paralyzed by the inevitability of death. Leo's face was grey. He had seconds left. Arya looked at the baby. Then she looked at the gun. Then she looked at the terrified paramedic. The Annie persona dissolved. The maid was gone. In her place stood Dr. Arya Vance, the woman who had once performed a heart transplant on a neonate during a power outage in Baltimore. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't speak. She lunged. She shoved Miller so hard he flew back into the equipment cart. Before Bruno or Rocco could react, She snatched the dropped scalpel from the floor. "Don't shoot!" Bruno yelled, raising his weapon. "Don't you dare touch him!" Vanessa shrieked. Arya ignored them. She ignored the guns pointed at her back. She ignored the fact that she was signing her own death warrant. She leaned over the baby, her world narrowing down to a single square inch of skin on the infant's neck. "Hold his head," Arya commanded. Her voice was ice. "Now." Rocco was so stunned by the sudden transformation of his cleaning lady that he obeyed. He stepped forward and gripped his son's head. "If you hurt him," Rocco hissed the gun barrel, pressing against Arya's temple. "If I don't, he dies," Arya said. She didn't look up. "Keep your hand steady, Mr. Marchetti, or you'll be the one who kills him." She placed the tip of the scalpel against the throat. She didn't tremble. The room was so silent that the hum of the central air conditioning sounded like a jet engine. Arya didn't feel the cold metal of the gun barrel pressing into her temple. She didn't feel the bruise forming on her hip where she had hit the wall. Her entire existence was focused on the small depression between the baby's thyroid and cricoid cartilage. It was a space smaller than a dime. "One move," Rocco warned his voice, a low growl that vibrated through the floorboards. "One mistake, and you die." "If I don't make this move, he dies anyway," Arya replied. Her voice was unrecognizable, stripped of the subservient maid's lilt, replaced by the commanding baritone of a chief resident. "Hand me the cannula. 14 gauge. Now." The lead paramedic, trembling and pale, fumbled in his kit. He was paralyzed by the surreal nature of the scene, the mob boss, the maid, the gun, and the dying air. He tossed a packaged needle onto the changing table. Arya didn't flinch. She ripped the package open with her teeth, never taking her eyes off the target. "Hold him still," she ordered Rocco. She pressed the scalpel down. A thin line of crimson beaded up on Leo's pale throat. Vanessa screamed from the doorway, a sound of pure hysteria. But Rocco didn't blink. He watched the maid's hands. They were rough red from bleach and scrubbing scarred from manual labor. But they were steady. Steadier than the hands of the surgeon he paid $10,000 a month to retain. Arya cut through the skin and the membrane. There was a sickening pop. "Cannula," she muttered. She inserted the needle into the incision, guiding it into the trachea. It was a blind insertion guided only by tactile memory and instinct. If she angled it wrong, she would puncture the esophagus or the posterior wall of the trachea. She felt the change in resistance. She was in. She pulled the needle out, leaving the plastic catheter in place. Then she leaned down, put her mouth over the plastic hub, and blew. It was crude. It was desperate. But it was effective. Leo's chest rose. A collective gasp went through the room. "Oxygen!" Arya barked, snapping her fingers at the paralyzed medical team. "Attach the bag to the hub. Now 100% flow." The paramedics scrambled like frightened children. They connected the oxygen line to the small catheter in Leo's neck. The bag inflated. Leo's corpulent chest rose again, and then the grey pallor began to fade. The blue lips turned pink. Beep. 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 The heart monitor, which had been slowing to a terminal rhythm, picked up speed. 80 beats per minute. 100. 120. Leo opened his eyes. He let out a weak, sputtering cough, then a cry. It wasn't a loud cry, but it was the most beautiful sound Rocco Marchetti had ever heard. Rocco dropped the gun. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. He fell to his knees beside the changing table, burying his face in the mattress, sobbing uncontrollably. The tension that had held him upright, snapped, leaving him a wreck of relief. "He's alive," Rocco choked out. "He's alive." Arya didn't cry. She didn't celebrate. She stepped back, her adrenaline crashing. The room spun. She grabbed the edge of the dresser to steady herself. The lead paramedic, regaining his senses, rushed forward to take over. "Okay, we have an airway. Let's get him to the ambulance. We need to transport him to the clinic immediately." He tried to push past Arya. "Careful with the tube," Arya said, her voice dropping back to a whisper. "It's not sutured. If you dislodge it during transport, you won't get it back in. The swelling is totally occluding the upper airway." The paramedic glared at her, humiliated that a house cleaner had just done the job he couldn't. "I know how to do my job, lady. Step back. You've done enough damage." "Damage?" Rocco's voice cut through the air. He stood up, wiping the tears from his face. His eyes were red, but the ruthless glint was back. He turned to the paramedic. "She saved his life. You were going to let him die. Sir, it was a high-risk procedure." "Get out," Rocco said calmly. "Take my son to the hospital. Stabilize him. If he dies on the way, don't bother coming back. I'll find you." The paramedics hurriedly loaded Leo onto the stretcher. As they wheeled the baby out, Arya watched them go, her heart aching. She wanted to go with him. She wanted to check his vitals, order blood work, figure out why his throat had closed up. But she was just the maid again. Vanessa stormed into the room as the medics left. Her face was flushed, her eyes darting around frantically. "Is he okay?" "He's alive," Rocco said, staring at the door where his son had just exited. "Oh, thank God," Vanessa said, though her voice sounded thin. She turned her venomous gaze on Arya. "And you crazy bitch. You cut him. You could have killed him." "Rocco, look at her. She's dangerous. She assaulted a medical professional. We need to call the police." Rocco turned slowly to look at Arya. Arya stood against the wall, her hands trembling now. She looked down at her uniform stained with soapy water and a few drops of Leo's blood. She knew what this looked like. She knew that once the shock wore off, the questions would start. "Bruno," Rocco said. The massive head of security stepped forward. "Boss, take Vanessa to her room. She's upset." "What?" Vanessa screeched. "Rocco, I'm talking about her. She held a knife to our son." "Go, Vanessa," Rocco said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Bruno gently but firmly guided the protesting woman out of the nursery. Then it was just Rocco and Arya. The silence stretched for a long time. Rocco walked over to where Arya was standing. He towered over her. He smelled of expensive cologne and fierce sweat. He reached out and took her hand, the one that had held the scalpel. He turned it over, looking at the calluses, the rough skin, the lack of a manicure. "Who are you?" he asked. It wasn't a question of her name. It was a question of her soul. "I'm Annie, sir. The maid." Rocco squeezed her hand hard enough to hurt. "Don't lie to me. I saw how you moved. I saw how you held that blade. You didn't hold it like a killer. You held it like a god. Paramedics panic. Doctors hesitate. You did neither." Arya tried to pull her hand away, but he held fast. "I used to work in a clinic," she lied. "In the Philippines, before I came here." Rocco studied her face, searching for the truth in her tired hazel eyes. "A clinic. And in this clinic, do maids perform emergency cricothyrotomies on infants with improvised equipment?" Arya looked down. "I just did what I had to do." Rocco released her hand. He walked to the window, looking out at the ambulance lights fading into the distance. "You're not going anywhere, Annie," he said. "You're off cleaning duty. From now on, you stay in the guest wing. Bruno will guard your door." "Am I a prisoner?" Arya asked, a spark of her old defiance flaring up. Rocco turned back to her, his face unreadable. "Until I find out who you really are. Yes, because if you're an enemy, I'll kill you for touching my son. But if you're who I think you might be, then you're the most valuable thing in this house." The guest wing was a euphemism. It was a gilded quong. Arya had been locked in a room that cost more per night than she made in a year. It had silk sheets, a marble bathroom, and a balcony overlooking the cliffs. But the door was locked from the outside, and a heavy-set guard named Tony stood watch in the hallway. She had paced the room for 3 hours. Her mind was racing. Leo didn't just have an allergic reaction, she thought, replaying the events in her head. There was no hive outbreak on his torso. No swelling of the lips until the very end. It was localized edema in the larynx. And the smell. When she had put her mouth over the catheter to breathe for him, she had tasted something on his breath. Bitter almonds. Cyanide. No too fast. Maybe a caustic agent or a concentrated allergen oil rubbed on the crib sheets. She stopped pacing. Someone had tried to kill Rocco Marchetti's baby, and they had done it in a way that mimicked natural causes. If Leo had died, the doctors would have called it SIDS, or a severe allergic reaction to formula. No one would have looked closer. The door clicked and swung open. Rocco walked in. He had changed his clothes. He was wearing a black dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, revealing tattoos on his forearms that spoke of a violent past. He held a manila folder in his hand. He didn't say a word. He walked to the small table in the center of the room, threw the folder down, and poured himself a drink from the crystal decanter on the sideboard. "Whiskey," he offered. "No," Arya said. She stood by the balcony doors, hugging herself. "How is Leo?" "Stable. He's in the ICU at St. Jude's. I have 20 men guarding the floor. No one gets in or out without a retinal scan." Rocco took a long sip of the amber liquid. "The doctors are confused. They say the incision was textbook. They say a plastic surgeon couldn't have done a cleaner job in an operating room, let alone a nursery." He tapped the folder. "It took my guys 2 hours to dig this up. You covered your tracks well, Annie. Fake social security number. Fake references. You even dyed your hair. It used to be blonde, didn't it?" Arya felt the blood drain from her face. She didn't move. Rocco opened the folder. He pulled out a glossy photograph. It was a clipping from a medical journal 3 years old. The headline read, "The prodigy of Hopkins, Dr. Arya Vance, youngest chief of pediatric surgery in history." He pulled out another clipping. This one was from a tabloid. "The Angel of Death, Dr. Vance, accused of euthanizing 5 infants for profit. License revoked. Criminal investigation. Pending." Rocco looked up his eyes hard. "Dr. Arya Vance, one of the most brilliant surgeons in the country, and for the last 6 months you've been scrubbing my toilets." Arya walked over to the table. She looked at the photo of her former self, smiling, wearing a white coat, holding an award. It felt like looking at a stranger. "It wasn't for profit," she said quietly. "I don't care about the accusations," Rocco said, waving a hand dismissively. "I'm a criminal Arya. I know how the law works. It's a story told by the winner. I want to know why you're here. Did my enemies send you? Did the Russos plant you here to kill my son? Kill him." Arya laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "I just saved his life, Rocco. If I wanted him dead, I would have let that idiot paramedic slice his thyroid open. Fair point, Rocco admitted. But that doesn't explain why a world-class surgeon is hiding in my house as a maid. I have nowhere else to go, Arya said, her voice breaking. After the scandal, I lost everything. My license, my home, my friends. The medical board blacklisted me. The media camped on my lawn. I couldn't get a job flipping burgers because everyone recognized my face. I needed money. My mother is dying of kidney failure. Her dialysis costs $4,000 a month. I needed a cash job where no one asked questions. Your house manager was hiring. I put on a wig, lowered my head, and became Annie. She looked at Rocco, her eyes wet. I didn't want trouble. I just wanted to save my mom. Rocco studied her. He was a human lie detector. He had survived 20 years in the Mafia by reading micro-expressions. He saw shame in her, and fear and desperation. But he saw no deceit. He closed the folder. "The charges against you," Rocco said. "Did you do it? Did you kill those babies?" "No," Arya said firmly. "I was framed. The hospital administrator was cutting corners, buying cheap defective heart valves from a black market supplier to save money. The valves failed. The babies died. When I found out and threatened to go to the FDA, he destroyed me. He planted evidence, falsified charts, and paid off nurses to testify against me. He had powerful friends. I had nothing." Rocco nodded slowly. "I believe you." Arya blinked, surprised. "You do. I know a setup when I see one, and I know talent. You have the hands of a healer, not a killer." He walked closer to her, invading her personal space. The air between them crackled with a strange electricity. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was the intensity of two predators recognizing each other. "But we have a problem, Doctor," Rocco said softly. "What problem?" "My son stopped breathing today, and it wasn't an accident." Arya's breath hitched. "You suspect foul play?" "I don't suspect. I know." Rocco's eyes darkened. "The doctors at the hospital found traces of oleander in his system. It's a flower, highly toxic. Someone put it in his formula." Arya gasped. "Oleander. That causes cardiac arrest and respiratory failure. It mimics anaphylaxis." "Exactly. Someone inside this house tried to murder my son while I was in the next room." Rocco turned away, pacing toward the window. "I can't trust anyone. Not my guards, not my staff. Certainly not the doctors on my payroll who almost killed him today." He turned back to her. "I need you." Arya shook her head. "I can't. If anyone finds out I practiced medicine, I'll go to prison. I'm already under investigation." "I own the police in this district," Rocco said, "and I have lawyers who can make your investigation disappear. I can clear your name, Arya. I can get your license back. I can pay for your mother's treatment, a transplant, not just dialysis. The best kidney money can buy." Arya felt her heart skip a beat. It was the offer of a lifetime. Salvation. "What do I have to do?" she whispered. "You become Leo's private physician. You live here. You watch him 24/7. You prepare his food. You check his medicine. You don't let anyone touch him but me." And Rocco paused, a dangerous shadow crossing his face. "You help me find out who poisoned him. I'm a doctor, not a detective," Arya said. "You're smart. You see things others miss. You saw the airway when 12 men missed it." Rocco stepped closer again, his voice dropping to a seductive, dangerous whisper. I need someone inside the house who isn't loyal to the family. Someone who is loyal only to the patient. Will you do it?" Arya thought of her mother sitting in a dingy clinic, hooked up to a machine. She thought of Leo, the innocent baby, with the big brown eyes, who had almost died in her arms. And she thought of Vanessa, with her fake smile and her hatred for the child. "I'll do it," Arya said. "Good." Rocco pulled a phone from his pocket. "Pack your things. You're moving to the master wing, the room next to the nursery." "And Rocco," Arya added, her voice hardening, "if I find the person who did this, I won't just tell you. I want to be there when you take them down." Rocco smiled a cold, terrifying smile that promised violence. "Deal." At that moment, the door burst open again. It was Vanessa. She was wearing a silk dressing gown, looking disheveled and frantic. But behind the panic, Arya saw a flash of pure calculation. "Rocco!" Vanessa cried, rushing to him. "I heard you were in here with the help. What is going on? Why is she still here?" Rocco put a protective arm around Vanessa, but Arya noticed his muscles didn't relax. He was playing a role. "Vanessa," Rocco said smoothly, "I have news. Annie isn't just a maid. She's a pediatric specialist I hired undercover to test our security protocols. And frankly, our security failed." Vanessa's eyes went wide. She looked at Arya with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. "A specialist?" "Yes," Rocco lied effortlessly. "And from now on, she is in charge of everything concerning Leo. Everything, including his diet." Vanessa paled. She took a half step back. "But Rocco, we don't know her. She's a stranger." "She saved his life, Nessie," Rocco said, his voice dropping to a chill. "Which is more than I can say for anyone else in this house today." Vanessa glared at Arya. It was a look of pure hatred. In that look, Arya saw the confirmation of her darkest suspicion. Vanessa wasn't just a wicked stepmother. She was the threat. "Welcome to the family, Doctor," Vanessa hissed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I hope you survive the night." The transition from Annie the maid to Dr. Vance was a seismic shift that rattled the very foundations of the Marchetti estate. The staff who had spent months ignoring Arya or barking orders at her now averted their eyes as she walked down the corridors in a crisp navy blazer and slacks provided by Rocco's personal stylist. They didn't know the full story, only that the boss had elevated the cleaning lady to a position of absolute authority, and that terrified them. But Arya didn't care about the whispers. She cared about the nursery. For the next 3 days, Arya turned Leo's room into a fortress. She threw out every bottle of formula, every jar of baby food, and every pacifier. She installed a medical-grade refrigerator for his new supplies, which she personally sourced from a pharmacy across the city, escorted by 2 armed guards. Leo was recovering. The swelling in his throat had subsided, leaving only a small red scar where Arya had inserted the cannula. He was back to his babbling self, clinging to Arya with a desperation that broke her heart. He knew in his infant way that she was safety, but the threat was still in the house. On the 4th afternoon, while Leo napped, Arya began her forensic sweep of the room. Rocco had given her free rein. She put on latex gloves and began to sift through the items she had bagged for disposal. If the oleander wasn't in the formula, which the lab results had come back inconclusive on it, had to be transdermal, absorbed through the skin. She picked up a bottle of soothing chamomile night lotion. It was a boutique brand imported from Paris. The seal looked intact, but when Arya held it up to the light, she noticed a tiny pinprick near the neck of the bottle. She unscrewed the cap and squeezed a drop onto a pH test strip she had requested. It didn't turn the expected color. She brought it to her nose. Beneath the heavy, cloying scent of artificial chamomile, there it was again, the faint, acrid whisper of bitter almonds. Concentrated oleandrin extract, she realized her stomach churning. Mixed into the lotion. Every time they bathed him, they were slowly poisoning him. It wasn't a sudden attack. It was an accumulation. They were murdering him by inches. "Found something." Arya jumped. Rocco was standing in the doorway. He moved so silently for a man of his size. He looked tired. The circles under his eyes were dark bruises, and his suit jacket was discarded on a chair. The war with the rival families was heating up, and the stress was radiating off him in waves. "This," Arya said, holding up the bottle. "It's the lotion. It's spiked with the toxin. Who bought this?" Rocco walked over, taking the bottle with a gloved hand. His jaw tightened until a muscle feathered in his cheek. "Vanessa. She gave it to the nanny last week. She said it was special for his dry skin." "There's your proof," Arya said, her voice shaking with rage. "Rocco, she's not just a bad stepmother. She's a sociopath. You have to arrest her, or whatever it is you do." Rocco looked at the bottle, then at Leo sleeping in the crib. He didn't look angry. He looked defeated. "I can't," he said softly. Arya stared at him. "What do you mean you can't? She tried to kill your son." "Vanessa is the daughter of Don Salvatore." Rocco explained, his voice devoid of emotion. "The Salvatore family controls the ports in the south. We are in the middle of a fragile truce. If I touch a hair on her head without absolute, undeniable proof that I can show to the commission, proof that links her directly to the purchase of the poison, Salvatore will declare war. And in that war, thousands will die, including likely me and Leo." "So she gets away with it?" Arya demanded, stepping closer to him. "You're going to let her walk around this house knowing she wants him dead?" "No," Rocco said. He reached out his hand, cupping Arya's cheek. His thumb brushed over her skin, rough against smooth. "That's why you're here. To be the shield I can't be right now. I have to play the game, Arya. I have to pretend I don't know. But you are my eyes. You are my hands." The intimacy of the moment stole the air from Arya's lungs. She looked up into his dark, tortured eyes and saw a man who was trapped in a golden cage of his own making. "I'm not a shield, Rocco," she whispered. "I'm a target. If she knows I know, then she'll come for you," Rocco finished. "And when she does, she'll make a mistake, and I'll be there to catch her." He leaned in. For a second, Arya thought he was going to kiss her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted him to. God help her, she wanted this dangerous, broken man to kiss her. But he pulled back. "Tonight is the gala," Rocco said, his voice hardening. "The charity ball at the estate. Salvatore will be here. Vanessa will be playing the role of the doting fiancé. You will attend. Me, the maid. No. Dr. Vance, my son's pediatrician." Rocco's eyes glittered. "I want you on my arm. I want Vanessa to see you. I want to provoke her. I want to make her so jealous, so angry that she slips up." "You're using me as bait," Arya realized. "Yes," Rocco admitted without shame. "Will you do it?" Arya looked at Leo. Then she looked at the man who would burn the world down to save him. "Get me a dress," she said. The gala was a display of obscene wealth. The ballroom was filled with men in tuxedos who had killed for their fortunes, and women in diamonds who looked the other way. The air smelled of expensive perfume, cigars, and fear. Arya descended the grand staircase wearing a gown of emerald green silk that Rocco had provided. It hugged her curves in ways her maid uniform never had, slit high up the thigh, revealing heels that clicked sharply on the marble. She wore no jewelry except for a simple pair of diamond studs, a gift from Rocco an hour ago. The room went silent as Rocco met her at the bottom of the stairs. He took her hand, placing it on his arm. "Don't look down," he whispered. "Look them in the eye. You're not a servant anymore. You're the queen tonight." Across the room, Vanessa stood with her father Don Salvatore, a corpulent man with eyes like a shark. Vanessa was wearing red. When she saw Arya, her glass of champagne shattered in her hand. "What is she doing here?" Vanessa hissed loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. Rocco guided Arya through the crowd straight toward his fiancée and her father. "Don Salvatore," Rocco said, bowing his head slightly in respect. "Vanessa." "Rocco," Salvatore boomed, his voice gravelly. "Who is this stunning creature? I didn't know you had a new mistress." Vanessa's face turned a shade of purple that clashed with her dress. "This is Dr. Arya Vance," Rocco said smoothly. "Leo's private physician. She saved his life earlier this week. I thought she deserved a night off." Salvatore raised an eyebrow. "The surgeon, the one from the news." "The very same," Rocco said. "She's under my protection now." Vanessa stepped forward, her eyes manic. "Daddy, she's a murderer. She killed babies in Baltimore." "Rocco is insane for letting her near Leo." "Enough, Vanessa." Rocco said, his voice low but cutting. "Dr. Vance is a guest of honor. Show some respect." Arya felt the hatred radiating off Vanessa like heat from a furnace. She decided to push. She decided to play the game Rocco wanted her to play. "It's lovely to meet you, Vanessa," Arya said, her voice sweet and cold. "By the way, I switched Leo's lotion. The lavender one seemed to be irritating his skin. I'm sure you didn't know." Vanessa froze. Her eyes locked with Arya's. In that split second, the confession was there. "She knows." "I don't know what you're talking about," Vanessa stammered. "Of course not." Arya smiled. "Just a medical observation." Rocco squeezed Arya's arm. It was a signal. Good job. But the victory was short-lived. Halfway through the night, chaos erupted. But it wasn't the kind Arya expected. It wasn't a gunshot or a scream. It was a text message that went out to every phone in the room simultaneously. A distinct ping, ping, ping echoed through the ballroom as 100 guests checked their phones. Arya checked hers. It was an anonymous blast. Attached was a video. The video showed Arya 3 years ago in the hospital ICU. But the audio was doctored. It showed her leaning over a dying infant, and a voice clearly AI-generated to sound like her said, "Just inject the potassium. Let's get this over with. I have a dinner reservation." A collective gasp went through the room. "She's a monster," a woman screamed, pointing at Arya. "Get her out of here," a man shouted. Vanessa stepped forward, a triumphant smirk on her face. "See, I told you she's a psychopath. She's probably planning to kill Leo tonight." Rocco looked at the phone, then at Arya. He knew it was fake. He knew it was a deep fake, likely orchestrated by Vanessa's team to discredit the witness. But the crowd was a mob, and Don Salvatore was looking at Rocco with narrowed eyes. "Rocco," Salvatore rumbled, "this is bad business. You have a child killer in your house, disrespecting my daughter." "It's fake." Rocco said, his voice straining to be heard. Doesn't matter, Salvatore said. Get rid of her, or the deal is off. Rocco was cornered. If he kept Aria, he lost the alliance. If he lost the alliance, the war started. Aria looked at Rocco. She saw the calculation in his eyes. She saw the pain. I'll go, Aria said, stepping back. I'll leave. No, Rocco said. Rocco, you have to, Aria whispered. For Leo. If they go to war, Leo dies. She turned and ran. She ran through the crowd, past the judging eyes, past the smirking Vanessa, and out the terrace doors into the garden. She made it to the fountain before the tears came. She had lost again. Vanessa had won. But as she stood there, shivering in the night air, she heard a sound that made her blood freeze. It wasn't a footstep. It was the click of a radio. Target is isolated in the garden, north sector. Green light for extraction. Aria spun around. 3 men dressed in black tactical gear emerged from the hedges. They weren't Marchetti security. They weren't Salvatore men. They were wearing masks with a red insignia. The Russos, the third family. The ones who wanted to burn everything down. They weren't here for her. They were here for the leverage. Grab her, the leader whispered. She's the key to the nursery. Aria tried to scream, but a gloved hand clamped over her mouth. A needle jabbed into her neck. The world went black. When Aria woke up, she wasn't in a cell. She was in a moving van. Her hands zip-tied to a metal rail. Across from her sat a man with a scar through his eyebrow and a machine gun on his knees. You're the key to the safe room, he sneered, holding up a tablet. He tapped the screen. It was a live feed of Aria's mother in the hospital. A man stood behind her chair, holding a syringe. Mrs. Vance is having a lovely nap, the scarred man said. But if you don't open the nursery door for us, she's going to have a very sudden heart attack. Aria strained against her bonds, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. She has nothing to do with this. Everyone is involved. Doc, now move. The van screeched to a halt at the servants' entrance of the Marchetti estate. The gala was still blaring music on the other side of the grounds, masking their entry. The Russo hit squad dragged Aria through the kitchen past unconscious staff, who had been gassed, and up the service elevator to the nursery. They stopped at the heavy oak door. Open it, the leader commanded. The medical override requires your retina. I won't, Aria said. The leader smashed the pistol into her jaw, then held the phone to her ear. She heard the rhythmic beep of her mother's dialysis machine. Do it, or she dies right now. Sobbing, Aria opened her eyes. The red laser scanned her retina. Access granted. The locks disengaged, and the 4 gunmen rushed in weapons raised to snatch the air. Clear, the point man shouted. But the crib was empty. The room was empty. Suddenly the door behind them slammed shut. The mechanical locks engaged with a sound like a gunshot. Welcome, gentlemen, Rocco's voice boomed over the nursery intercom. The gunman spun around. It's a trap, a hiss filled the room. The air vents were pumping in inert gas. The room was a sealed steel cage. We have the girl, the leader screamed into the intercom. We have your doctor. Open the door, or we kill her. There was a long, agonizing pause. I know, Rocco said, his voice cracking slightly. I'm sorry, Aria. Aria looked up at the camera in the corner. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Rocco had staged the fight with Salvatore. He had sent her into the garden, knowing she would be taken. He had used her as a human key to lure the hit squad into this trap. "You bastard!" the leader screamed, raising his gun at Arya. "If we die, she dies first. Get down!" The shout came from the changing table. The top exploded upward, and Bruno, the head of security, emerged from a hidden compartment wearing a gas mask and wielding a shotgun. Boom! The leader went down instantly. Arya threw herself to the floor as the room erupted into chaos. Gunfire ricocheted off the reinforced walls. Bruno pumped the shotgun, taking out a second man. The last surviving gunman, realizing he was trapped, turned his weapon on Arya. "You set us up," he fired. The bullet grazed Arya's shoulder, burning like a hot iron. She scrambled back, grabbing a pistol dropped by the dead leader. She had never fired a gun in her life. She was a healer, not a killer. But she thought of Leo, and she thought of her mother. She didn't aim. She just squeezed. The bullet hit the gunman in the knee. He went down, screaming, and Bruno finished him with a blow from the shotgun stock. The door hissed and unlocked. Rocco stood there, holding Leo in one arm and a gun in the other. He rushed to Arya, handing the baby to a guard. "Arya." He fell to his knees, checking her bleeding shoulder. "God, I thought Bruno would be faster." Arya pulled away, her eyes cold. "You used me. You risked my mother." "Your mother is safe," Rocco said quickly. "I secured her hospital room hours ago. The video was a recording." He tried to reach for her again. "I had to catch them, Arya. I needed to know who the mole was." He turned to the gunman, writhing on the floor. "Who sent you? Who gave you the codes?" The gunman laughed, blood bubbling on his lips. He looked past Rocco toward the doorway. "Ask her." Rocco turned. Standing in the doorway, holding a silenced pistol aimed directly at Rocco's head, was Vanessa. "Hello, darling." She smiled wickedly. "I told you the maid was trouble." The silencer on Vanessa's pistol stared directly at Rocco. "Drop it," Vanessa commanded. Rocco and Bruno slowly lowered their weapons. "Why?" Rocco asked, his voice shattered. "I gave you everything." "You gave me a ghost," Vanessa spat, stepping over the body of the gunman she had hired. "You're still in love with your dead wife." "The Russos offered me something real, the shipping routes. All I had to do was give them the air, and the Empire would be mine." She shifted her aim toward Arya. But now the narrative changes. The crazy, disgraced surgeon kills the boss and his son, then takes her own life. We'll start with the suicide. Vanessa pulled the trigger. Rocco moved faster than thought. He threw himself in front of Arya. The bullet slammed into his chest, driving them both to the floor. "Rocco!" Arya screamed, her hands instantly slick with his blood. "How touching," Vanessa sneered, walking closer for the kill shot. "Romeo and Juliet." She stepped forward, but her heel caught on an IV tube. Arya, pinned beneath Rocco, saw her chance. She grabbed the scalpel she had dropped during the ambush. With the precision that had made her a prodigy at Hopkins, she threw it. The blade embedded deep into Vanessa's calf. Vanessa shrieked, her leg buckling. Before she could recover, Bruno launched himself at her, delivering a thunderous blow to her temple with the butt of his shotgun. Vanessa went limp. "Rocco, look at me," Arya gasped, tearing open his shirt. Pink froth bubbled on his lips. "No hospital," he whispered, his skin turning grey. "I don't need a hospital," Arya declared, her fear replaced by cold surgical focus. "Bruno." "The trauma kit." Bruno tossed the bag. Arya saw the sucking chest wound. He was drowning in his own blood. She grabbed a large bore needle. "This will hurt," she said, and drove the needle between his ribs. Air hissed out a pneumothorax, relieving pressure. Rocco gasped, dragging in a life-saving breath. "Stay with me," Arya commanded. "I love you," Rocco whispered before darkness took him. 6 months later. A framed newspaper article hung in the study. Medical board reinstates Dr. Arya Vance, hospital administrator indicted for fraud. Arya stood on the balcony, watching the sunset over the Amalfi coast. She wore white silk, not a maid's uniform. "You're thinking too loud," a voice said. Rocco joined her. He moved stiffly, favoring his healing chest, but he was alive. He wrapped his arms around her. "Thinking about the hospital. Thinking about how much I hate paperwork." She smiled. "But Leo is finally asleep." "He calls you Mama now," Rocco said softly. He turned her around, his expression turning serious. He pulled a velvet box from his pocket, revealing a deep blue sapphire. "Arya, you came here with a bucket and a secret. You saved my son when I couldn't. You saved me when I didn't deserve it. You aren't a maid. You are the heart of this family." He dropped to one knee. "Marry me. Not for the alliance, but because I can't breathe without you." Arya looked at the man who had burned down the underworld to clear her name. "One condition," she said, kneeling to meet him eye level. "No more secrets. We are partners, in the business and in the danger." Rocco smiled, pressing his forehead against hers. "Deal." He slipped the ring on her finger. The maid was gone. The queen had arrived. What an incredible journey. From scrubbing floors to saving the heir of a Mafia empire. Arya Vance proved that true strength isn't about muscle or guns. It's about skill, courage, and the will to protect the innocent. This story reminds us that heroes often wear the most unexpected disguises, and that sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the only one who can save the day. It also shows us that karma is real. Vanessa's greed was her downfall, while Arya's selfless love for baby Leo restored her life and reputation. Would you have forgiven Rocco for using Arya as bait, even if it was to save his son? Or is that a deal breaker? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dramatic roller coaster, please smash that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a good romance twist, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching.